My mother looked at my 6-year-old son and called us freeloaders. She was standing in a house I paid for, with an inheritance she took from me when I was 18. I gave her 48 hours to sign or leave. My name is Jessamine. I am a financial analyst. I spend my days reading balance sheets, projecting risk, tracking where money goes and who benefits when it moves. The irony of that career choice is not lost on me, because the first financial lesson I ever learned was what it feels like to watch your own money disappear into someone else's dream and never come back. My grandmother passed when I was 17. She was not the kind of woman who gave speeches or left long letters. She was quiet and steady, and she worked her whole life. When her estate was settled, she left me $180,000. Not to my mother, Genevieve, not to my sister, Tatum, not to my father, Warren. To me, specifically by name. I did not understand at the time what that meant. I was 17. I had never seen that kind of money. I had never been singled out for anything in my family. Tatum was the one who got singled out. Tatum was the event. Every room she walked into rearranged itself around her. My mother made sure of that. My father allowed it by saying nothing, which in my family was the same as agreement. The money sat in a trust until I turned 18. On my birthday, before the cake, before any celebration, my mother sat me down at the kitchen table. Tatum was there, Warren was there, the papers were already printed. Tatum had an idea for a cafe. She had been talking about it for months, a brunch place with aesthetic interiors and a social media following. She had the concept, she had the branding, she did not have the money. My mother said the inheritance could help. She said it would be a temporary investment. She said the cafe would turn a profit within a year and the money would come back with interest. She said, this is what families do. She said, your grandmother would have wanted this. I was 18. I had spent my whole life being the quiet one, the cooperative one, the one who made things easier by not asking questions. So I signed. I signed every page they put in front of me. I did not read the fine print. I did not ask for a lawyer. I did not even ask what I was signing beyond the first document. My mother smiled when I finished. Tatum hugged me, Warren nodded from across the table, and $180,000 left my name and entered a dream that was never mine. The cafe opened 4 months later. It closed 11 months after that. Tatum blamed the location, then the landlord, then the economy, then the staff. She blamed everything except the decisions she made and the money she spent. The $180,000 was gone. No profit, no repayment plan, no conversation about what happened to it, just silence. And the silence in my family always meant the same thing. Do not bring it up, move on. Be grateful you are part of this. But the money was not the worst part. I found out years later, during a routine credit check for an apartment application, that my score was destroyed. I could not understand it. I had been careful. I had paid every bill on time since I started working. I pulled my credit report and the answer was sitting there in black and white. 3 accounts I had never opened, 2 lines of credit tied to the cafe, a business loan co-signed with my name. All from those papers I signed at the kitchen table on my 18th birthday. They had not just taken my inheritance, they had used my signature to secure debt. Tatum's dream had collapsed, and the wreckage landed on my credit file. My grandmother left me money. My family left me debt. I spent years cleaning that up, years of calls to credit bureaus, years of disputes and documentation, and letters explaining that an 18-year-old had been handed papers she did not understand. It took time, but I rebuilt. I rebuilt my credit. I rebuilt my career. I moved to a different city. I became the person my family never expected me to be. Not because I was trying to prove anything, because I was trying to survive. And then I had Arlo. He changed everything the way children do, not with noise or drama, with weight. The weight of knowing someone is watching you to learn how the world works. He was 6 years old and he paid attention to everything. How I answered the phone, how I handled stress, how I responded when someone was unfair. He was building his blueprint from my behavior and I knew it. Every decision I made from the day he was born had a second audience, and I refused to teach him that being used was the same as being loved. I raised him alone, I worked, I saved. I built a life that was small and steady and completely ours. No one in my family knew the details. They did not ask. Tatum called when she needed something. My mother called when Tatum needed something. Warren called when my mother told him to. The cycle had a rhythm, and I had learned to hear it coming. Every call started the same way. Something had gone wrong in Tatum's life, and somehow the solution involved me. Her car broke down and she needed money. Her apartment lease fell through and she needed a guarantor. Her credit card was maxed and she needed a bridge loan until next month. Every time my mother framed it the same way. She said, "This is the last time." She said, "Family helps family." She said, "Your sister is going through a rough patch." The rough patch had been going on for a decade. I said no more often as the years passed, but no in my family was not a complete sentence. It was the beginning of a negotiation that ended with me saying yes because the guilt was louder than the logic. Then one evening, Tatum called. Her voice was different, not the usual performance. She sounded flat. She said Warren had been in a car accident. She said he was in the hospital. She said the house was behind on payments and there was a foreclosure notice on the kitchen counter. She said she needed me to come home. I looked at Arlo. He was on the floor drawing with crowns. He did not know any of these people. He had met his grandparents twice. Both times were short and uncomfortable. He called Warren the tall, quiet man, and Genevieve the lady who did not smile. He had no concept of the weight I carried from that house. He just knew that sometimes the phone rang and his mother's face changed. I told Tatum I would think about it. She said there was no time to think. She said Warren was hurt and the house was in danger, and I needed to come now. I said I would call her back. I sat on the couch after Arlo went to sleep. I looked at the ceiling. I thought about the kitchen table, the papers, the signature, the cafe that took everything and gave nothing back, the credit score that took years to rebuild, the silence that followed every sacrifice, the pattern: call, crisis, fix, silence. Call, crisis, fix, silence. And now another call. Another crisis, and somewhere at the end of it, another signature they wanted me to put on something that would cost me more than money. But Warren was in the hospital, and the house was my grandmother's before it was theirs. And somewhere under all the anger and the scar tissue, there was still a 17-year-old girl who remembered sitting on that porch with a woman who left her everything she had. I packed a bag for Arlo and me. I put him in the car seat. I drove. The house looked the same from the outside, smaller than I remembered, or maybe I had grown. The porch light was on, the foreclosure notice was taped to the inside of the front window where the neighbors could not see it, but I could. I unbuckled Arlo, he held my hand, we walked up the steps. I stood at the door. My hand was on the handle, and for a moment I was 18 again, sitting at that kitchen table, signing something I did not understand, trusting people who had already decided what my name was worth. I opened the door. The house smelled the same. That was the first thing I noticed. Coffee and carpet cleaner and something floral my mother had been spraying into the air since I was a child. Arlo held my hand tighter when we stepped inside. He did not know this place. He had been here once before, and he had spent most of that visit sitting on my lap asking when we were leaving. Warren was in the living room, not in a hospital bed, not in a wheelchair. He was sitting in his recliner with a bandage on his wrist and a brace on his knee. He looked up when I walked in, and he gave me the nod, the same nod he had given me my whole life, the one that meant, "I see you, but I am not going to be the one who speaks first." I looked at the brace. I looked at the bandage. I said, "I thought you were in the hospital." Tatum appeared from the kitchen. She said he was discharged yesterday. She said the doctor said he needs rest. She said it was worse than it looked. Warren shifted in his chair the way people shift when someone is describing their injuries as more serious than they are, and they do not have the energy to correct it. I understood then. Warren had been in an accident, that part was real, but the severity had been inflated. The phone call had been designed to get me in the door, and now that I was inside, the real conversation was coming. It did not take long. Genevieve came downstairs. She looked at me, she looked at Arlo, She did not say hello to either of us. She sat at the dining table and she said, "We need to talk about the house." She said the payments were months behind. She said the bank had already started the process. She said they needed a significant amount of money to stop the foreclosure, and none of them had it. I said, "How much?" She said a number that made me set my jaw. It was not a small number. It was the kind of number that does not come from missing one payment. It comes from missing many, for a long time, while pretending everything was fine. I asked how it got this far. Genevieve said the economy. She said unexpected expenses. She said Tatum had been helping, but it was not enough. I looked at Tatum. She looked at the floor. I knew what that meant. Tatum had not been helping. Tatum had been part of the problem. But in this family, the truth was always rearranged so that Tatum was either the hero or the victim, never the cause. I said I needed to think about it. That was the wrong answer. Genevieve's face changed. Not dramatically. She did not yell. She did something worse. She looked at Arlo. He was sitting on the floor near my chair, drawing on a napkin with a pen he had found on the side table. He was quiet the way he always was in unfamiliar places, small and careful and paying attention to everything without looking like he was paying attention to anything. My mother looked at him and then looked at me and said, "You show up here after years of nothing, you bring this child into my house, you sit there with your job and your apartment and your life, and you tell me you need to think about it?" Then she said the sentence that changed everything. She said, "You and your kid are just freeloaders. You always have been. All you have ever done is take from this family and give nothing back." The room stopped. Warren looked at his hands. Tatum looked at the window. Nobody corrected her. Nobody said, "That is not true." Nobody said, "Actually, Jessamine signed away $180,000 at 18 so Tatum could open a cafe that failed in less than a year." Nobody said, "Actually, Jessamine's credit was destroyed because her name was put on debts she never agreed to." Nobody said, "Actually, Jessamine has spent the last decade rebuilding everything this family burned down." Nobody said any of that, because in this house, the truth had never been the point. But it was not the words about me that broke something. I had heard versions of those words my whole life. It was the fact that she said them while looking at my son, a 6-year-old boy sitting on the floor drawing on a napkin. He looked up when she raised her voice. He looked at me, and he said one word, "Mama." That word hit me harder than anything Genevieve had ever said, because in that single syllable, I heard the future. I heard Arlo growing up in the same system, learning that love means absorption, learning that family means handing over whatever they ask for and being grateful when they let you stay, learning that his mother was someone people called when things broke and forgot when things were fine. I had spent 6 years trying to build a different blueprint for him, and in one sentence, my mother tried to hand him the old one. I stood up. I did not raise my voice. I picked Arlo up and put him on my hip. I looked at Genevieve and I said, "This is done." I said, "I came here because I was told my father was seriously hurt. He is sitting in a recliner watching television." I said I was told the house was in danger. It is in danger because you let it get here, while calling everyone else when the bills came due. I said you just called your grandson a freeloader. He is 6. He has not taken a single thing from anyone in this room, and neither have I. This family took from me $180,000, my credit, my name, and I am done pretending that was normal. Genevieve started to speak. I said, "I am not finished." I said Tatum's cafe did not just fail. The debts from that cafe are on my credit report. My name is on loans I never agreed to, accounts I never opened, lines of credit I never applied for. You used an 18-year-old signature to secure financing for a business that collapsed, and then you never told me the damage was still attached to my name. That is not family helping family, that is fraud. The words sat in the room the way stones sit at the bottom of water, heavy and still and impossible to move. Tatum said, "That is not true." I said, "I have the documents." She went white. I walked out. Arlo's arms were around my neck. His face was pressed into my shoulder. He did not cry, he just held on, and I held him back, and I thought about every time I had walked out of this house carrying something heavy. At 18, it was a ruined signature. At 23, it was a destroyed credit score. Tonight, I was carrying my son, and he was the first thing I had ever taken from this house that was worth keeping. Over the next few days, Tatum did what Tatum always does when she loses control of the story. She called everyone, aunts, cousins, family friends. She told them Warren had been in a serious accident. She told them Jessamine had come home and refused to help. She told them I had walked out on my own father while he was recovering. She built the version she needed and she sent it out like a press release. The messages started arriving. People I had not heard from in years suddenly had opinions. A cousin texted me saying she could not believe I would abandon my family like that. An aunt left a voicemail saying she was disappointed in me. The narrative was clean and complete, and it had Tatum's fingerprints all over it. I did not defend myself. I did not send long messages explaining my side. I waited until the family group chat was active. I waited until Tatum had finished her version, and then I sent one message. I wrote, "Since we are sharing what happened, can someone explain why the debts from Tatum's Cafe are registered in my name? I have the credit report if anyone wants to see it." Nobody responded for 48 hours. Then the messages stopped. All of them. The cousin did not text again. The aunt did not call back. Tatum did not post another word. Silence. But this time, the silence was not mine to carry. It was theirs. I sat at my kitchen table that night after Arlo was asleep. The same posture I had at 18, same table position, different table, different woman. I opened my laptop. I pulled up every document I had saved over the years, every credit dispute, every account trace, every line of debt tied to my name that I had not created. I organized them into a folder. Then I picked up the phone. I called my attorney. I said, "I need you to pull the foreclosure file on my parents' house." I said, "I need you to find every document with my signature from the day I turned 18. And I said, "I need to know exactly what it would take to buy that house out of foreclosure." She said, "Are you sure?" I said, "I have never been more sure of anything." My attorney worked fast. Within weeks, she had the full picture. The foreclosure was deep. Months of missed payments, penalties stacked on penalties. The bank had already started proceedings and the timeline was short. The house was going to auction. She also found what I asked her to find. Every document with my signature from the day I turned 18. 3 credit lines, 2 co-signed accounts, a business loan guarantee, all tied to the cafe, all in my name. None of them with my informed consent. The paperwork had been structured so that my signature appeared on pages I had never been shown individually. I had signed a stack. They had built a debt profile from it. My attorney said we had a strong case. She said it would take time, but the fraudulent accounts could be removed and my record corrected. I told her to start the process. Then I told her to do one more thing. I said, "I want to buy that house out of foreclosure. Cash." She asked if I was sure. I said the house belonged to my grandmother before it belonged to them. I said I spent 10 years rebuilding what they destroyed. I said I have the money and I am not asking for their permission. She said she would handle it. The purchase closed quietly. No negotiation with my family, no conversation. The bank was selling and I was buying. The paperwork moved through channels that had nothing to do with anyone in that living room. When it was done, the deed had one name on it, mine. I drove to the house on a Saturday morning. Arlo was at a friend's house. I wanted to do this alone. I parked in the driveway and I sat in the car for a few minutes. The last time I had been at this house, I was carrying my son out the door while my mother's words were still hanging in the air. Freeloaders. That word, aimed at a 6-year-old who had been drawing on a napkin. I walked up the steps. I knocked. I did not use the door the way family uses a door. I knocked the way a stranger knocks, because that is what I was in this house. I had always been the stranger they called when they needed something fixed. Genevieve opened the door. She looked at me the way she always looked at me, like I was a sentence she had already decided how to finish before I started speaking. I said, "I bought the house." She did not move. I said the bank was going to sell it at auction. I bought it before that happened. The deed is in my name.
Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. Warren appeared behind her in the hallway. Tatum's car was not in the driveway. It was just the three of us and the truth sitting between us like furniture nobody wanted to move. I said, "I am not here to throw you out. I am here to tell you what happens next." I said, "You can stay in this house, but there are conditions." I handed Genevieve a folder. Inside was a document my attorney had prepared. Simple language, clear terms. A written acknowledgement from Tatum that the debts placed in my name were done without my understanding or consent. A commitment to cooperate with the legal process to remove those accounts from my credit file. And a monthly contribution toward the property taxes. Not rent, not a mortgage, just the taxes, their share of keeping a roof that now belonged to me. I said, "This is not punishment. This is accountability. You can live here, but the days of pretending none of this happened are over. If Tatum signs the acknowledgement and the debts are corrected, the arrangement stands. If not, I will sell the property and you can make your own arrangements." Genevieve looked at the folder. She did not open it. She looked at me and said, "You expect us to be tenants in our own home?" I said I was a stranger in my own inheritance. I was 18 years old and I sat at that table and I signed everything you put in front of me because I trusted you. And you used that trust to finance a business that failed and left the damage on my name. I spent years fixing what you broke. Years. So if living in a house with your daughter's name on the deed feels uncomfortable, imagine what it felt like to find out your family put debt on your credit before you were old enough to understand what a credit score was. She did not respond. Warren stood in the hallway with his hands in his pockets. He did not speak, he did not defend her, he did not defend me. He just stood there the way he had stood in every doorway of every conflict for my entire life. Present, motionless, a vote that always went the same direction by never being cast. I said, "You have 48 hours to sign or leave." Then I left. Tatum called that night. Not crying, not panicking, cold. She said, "You had no right to buy that house." I said the bank had every right to sell it and I had every right to buy it. She said, "You are trying to control us." I said, "I am trying to correct what was done to me. Those are different things." She said, "I am not signing anything." I said, "Then the house goes to market and you explain to your parents where they are going to live." She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "You have changed." I said, "No, I just stopped signing things I have not read." Weeks passed. The legal process moved forward. One by one, the fraudulent accounts were flagged, disputed, and removed from my credit file. Each one felt like peeling off a label someone had stuck to me without asking. The process was slow, but it was working. My name was becoming mine again. Tatum signed the acknowledgement on the second day, 47 hours in. She did not call me to tell me. She sent it through her own attorney. No note, no apology, just the signature. I looked at it for a long time. Her name on a line, the way mine had been on a line 10 years earlier, except she knew exactly what she was signing, and she hated every letter of it. The arrangement held. My parents stayed in the house, the taxes were paid on time, the communication was minimal. Not warm, not hostile, just factual. The way things are when the performance is over and people are learning to exist without a script. Genevieve did not call me. Not once. She lived in a house her daughter owned, and she treated that fact the way she treated everything that challenged her version of the story. She ignored it. Some people do not change. They just get quieter. Then one evening, months after everything had settled, I got a text from Warren. 2 words. "How is Arlo?" I stared at the screen. In my entire life, my father had never asked me a personal question. He had never mentioned my son by name. He was the man in the doorway, the man who nodded, the man whose silence kept the machinery running. But now he was asking about a boy he had met twice, a boy his wife had called a freeloader, a boy who still referred to him as the tall, quiet man. I did not know what to make of it. I did not know if it was the beginning of something or a reflex from a man whose house now had someone else's name on it. But I did not delete it. I held the phone and I looked at the message and I thought about all of the things that could live inside 2 words if you let them. I did not respond that night, but I did not close the door either. Arlo and I had dinner that evening, just the 2 of us, at our kitchen table. He was drawing again. He draws constantly. Shapes and buildings and things he cannot name yet but feels compelled to put on paper. He looked up at me while I was watching him and said, "Are we going to that house again?" I said, "I do not know." He said, "Okay." Then he went back to drawing.
I looked at him and I thought about what my grandmother might say if she could see this table, a different kitchen, a different woman, a boy she never met. I thought about the money that was taken, the years I spent rebuilding, and I thought about what I had now, a life that was mine, a son who was safe, a name that was clean, and a house with my signature on the deed instead of someone else's debt. My inheritance was never the money. My inheritance was learning that the signature I put on a piece of paper at 18 was the last one I would ever give away without reading every word. If someone in your family ever made you feel like your only value was what you could give them, I want you to hear this. You are not a resource. You are not an emergency fund. You are not the person who keeps the lights on while everyone else takes credit for the room. You are allowed to read the fine print. You are allowed to say no, and you are allowed to take back what was always yours. Have you ever had to set a boundary with family that everyone told you was wrong, but you knew was right? Tell me about it in the comments, and drop where you are watching from and what time it is. I want to know who is here. If this story stayed with you, hit that subscribe button. I will see you in the next one.